Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Stephanie Benson-Gonzalez with UW's Parent and Family Program. Before we begin today, I just want to start by letting you know that this presentation is being captioned. That link is listed in the description window under the video panel on the YouTube or Facebook page. Today's panel is also being recorded for later viewing, and you can watch this discussion anytime at the same link. So today we are so excited to be joined by Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Lori Reesor, for our first ever virtual family weekend. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to hear Vice Chancellor Reesor speak before, she is both a college administrator and a college parent of a first-year student, and that intersection, I think, is unique and will allow for a lot of really good conversation today. So Lori, thank you for being here with us.
Hi, Stephanie. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. So I want to begin with a question that I feel like is simple, but it's just so central to our philosophy as the Parent and Family Program, and I think too as our values as an institution. So to begin today, kind of as a starting point for us, from your perspective, why is parent and family support so important when students are in college?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And again, thanks for having me. I absolutely love talking with Badger parents. Again, it's one more thing of a little bit of remorse. Like I remember last year being in the ballroom and or varsity hall and engaging with parents in person. So sorry that we're not able to do that. And hopefully this will be a meaningful experience for everybody. And actually, I also want to do a shout out to you, Monica. I think you guys are awesome and you do such great work with all of our parents and the programming and support that you do for them, including all the events that you're doing this weekend. So thanks to you and Monica as well. And then one more thing of acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge up front that we have a lot of diversity in our students and really in our families. Some students may have two parents, some may have one parent, some are blended families, all different cultures and backgrounds and situations. So please know that everything that we say today comes from a place of respecting what family means to you. And that can mean really, really different things. So I hope some of the advice and stories and experiences we'll share, but they're my experiences personally, and then from my friends and colleagues, and then certainly in just supporting our students and families and my professional experience. But the one thing we all have in common is we love our students and we want them to be successful at UW-Madison. So that's the bond that keeps us all together. So as you said, there's no question, and I've always said this and I always believe this, that parents really play an important role in students' experience. And the role of parenting has changed, but now more than ever, I just think parents are so connected to our students. Some friends and I were having dinner a couple weeks ago and talking about do you remember your parents dropping you off or moving you in? And I was like, yeah, no. I know my parents didn't take me to college. Now I was a first generation college student, but I moved in by myself. And so it's just so different in all of those kinds of ways. But we never stop being a parent and we never actually stop being a child. So one other quick story is I was doing some work with my dad a couple weeks ago, and my dad's 91. And so we were trying to get a notary and some official paperwork, and he called me. He's like, okay, Laura, I want to tell you, this is how you do it. So you have to call the bank, you have to do that. And I'm like, Dad, I'm a pretty successful administrator of a lot of kind of programs at a pretty big university. I know how to do a notary, but thanks. But I mean, it was just like, wow, it doesn't really matter how old I am. He's still my dad. He still wants to help me. He's still going to give me advice just in case I need it. So again, the bottom line is it's an important relationship. We're in this all together, and we want to support our parents and help them be successful because we know that our students will be successful. So thank you.
That is so true. And I love the story about your dad because, right, this is maybe the one job many of us have in life that never stops, really.
Yeah. And I always thought, at some age, okay, I'm a grown up, but it really doesn't matter in that relationship. I am always, I don't know, I should ask my dad, how old do you think I am, Dad? I'm just curious in your mind. So I still think I'm in my 30s, so he might still think that too. And that's not quite true. So it's an amazing developmental process. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me, I feel like sometimes when families call in, they'll say things like, I'm trying to give my student this advice. And they're like, Mom, Dad, I got it. I'm a sophomore. I figured this out by now. So I feel like those conversations are cyclical, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, and then as we age and don't think we look older, boy, do they look younger though. So that's the other weird dynamic. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have junior high students on campus now. And then I'm like, oh wait, oh no, we don't. I think it's me, not them. So yeah. Totally.
Oh, that idea like of when to provide assistance to. And I know like as a parent too, we have the best intentions. And for this session, I should have added at the beginning. So we asked parents and families in our Facebook group what they wanted to hear from you and kind of shared a little bit about the two perspectives that you have for this conversation. And so we posted in our Facebook group and asked that question. And I actually wanted to pull a quote from it. So one parent wrote, we watched Vice Chancellor Reesor's videos during virtual SOAR and at the start of the school year. Unfortunately, we still struggle with deciding at what point we should provide assistance to our badger. And then she goes on to say, just like riding a bike, thriving as an adult requires practice and patience. How do we find that balance so our badger will be successful and also independent?
Oh gosh, right. This is every day. And again, every day for the rest of our lives. And I do think there is that element that we always need help and support. Again, we always need it. We may not always want it. We may not always think we need it. We may not always ask for it, but we really do need that help and support. So I hope people know that that should never change. I don't think that should change. I think what we're trying to help them do though is kind of what we talked about at SOAR, is that coaching kind of piece, and telling them how to do it. So like, I know that at times when I'm talking with my daughter, she'll say, how about if I say this? And she'll show me her text. She'll, what if I say it this way? So again, giving feedback and along all those things, I think is super important. Or gosh, what do I say to my professor? What do I do? How do I approach this? Or how do I call this office? I think all those things are really important, helpful pieces. To me, the boundary is if you said, I'll call that faculty member for you. Then it's like, back up. Let them do that. Now, again, certain extreme situations, maybe there's some financial situations that you do feel like you need to understand. Those are all legitimate pieces because sometimes it is your money and it is, you have some responsibility in this as well. But again, I think helping them. I have a quick example of this one, Stephanie. So my daughter was living in the residence halls and she called me and she's like, they just removed all of our furniture outdoors or something. And I was like, what? Like, that's ridiculous. This is not right. We don't want this to happen. And I thought, who should I call? I should just call somebody. I should talk to them and just kind of be like, hey, do you know what we're doing? And then I was like, wait, not my job. And again, these two hats that I'm wearing. And then I asked her a couple more questions. I'm like, well, why did that happen? And she's like, well, yeah, I guess we weren't following the rules. Good thing I didn't make that call because there was another whole side of that story, right? But again, there was this instinct, like I wanted to step in, and especially with my role. I knew I had some connections. I knew knew who to call, but I just thought, it's not my place. And so I just said, have you thought about talking to your house fellow? Have you thought about this? And she's like, well, and then again, tells me a little bit more of the story. And I was like, yeah, suck it up, Buttercup. I think you all might have gotten what you deserved. So figure this one out. But yeah, there is that instinct of my child's been wronged and I need to fix this. And that was, small scale, but it was still like this mama bear, like, I'll take care of this. I'm going to protect you kind of thing. It was hard.
I feel like that's a natural plug for the parent and family program. So you could always call me Lori.
Well, there may be more calls that you'll get stuff.
But I hear that. And oh my gosh, I was smiling too, because that reminds me of a story I used to tell at SOAR in one of our family transition sessions. And it was a lot of storytelling in that session. And I think there was a parent one year who mentioned they had a student who was a little bit older in college, and they'd mentioned that there was like a smell in the room and they thought it was the roommate, and the parent wanted to call housing. long story short, the student didn't mention it for a few weeks, and the parent asked about it, like, oh, we had some old food in our garbage can. So the parent was like, I'm so glad I didn't try to intervene in that. But that is such an instinct. I relate to that feeling, and I totally know what you mean. So it's kind of helpful to hear that. And I think too, you brought up a good piece of advice that's tangible for folks, which is perhaps asking some questions before taking an action too. I feel like that's really helpful. I'll remember that also.
Yeah.
So I guess on this topic of communication, we had another parent, when we asked for ideas, ask if you have advice on getting your student to open up and share how they're doing beyond saying, I'm fine. This parent says, have you found any success in starting a deeper conversation? And I have to tell you, I get this question a lot from parents and families, and they're not sure. And I think part of that is some of the texting culture we have, which is really helpful. I think I want to say one of the stats I heard a few years ago is like the average college parent talks to their student like 15 times a day or something like that because of text messages. And so I think there's this advantage to always being connected, but the deepness to our conversations, how do we go about fostering communication like that?
Yeah, gosh, boy, this is a lifelong piece as well. And I have to probably put up, I might have a little gender bias in this one, so I'll own that, and unfair. And but I also have parents of a number of parents who have boys as well who identify this. So as you all might remember, I have both two children, a boy and a girl, and they couldn't be more different in this communication space. And so I have no problems with my daughter opening up. In fact, at times I have to go, whoa, 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 stop, nope, don't want to hear that, don't want to know. That is your friend's story. That is not your mom's story. I don't really want to know what your friend did with that boy Friday night. Nope, too much. So again, right, it's just different boundaries. And so, but I remember when I was younger, or when my children were younger, and so again, kind of pretty much stereotypes that they talked about that boys sometimes talk better when they're active. Now this doesn't, I've been trying to think about how do I translate that in college or when they're away. But the thing was, when they were little, was like you give them a task, and while they're doing something, playing with their toys or going for a walk, to be like, and hey, how are your friends, or how are things going? You know, that they're more active. I actually do this with my husband. I'm like, hey, let's go for a walk. And then I'm like, hey, let's talk about some things. So, but I couldn't really figure out how to translate that in some ways. But I think the other couple pieces I would say is not the traditional how are you question. It's a place to start, but tell me about. And when our kids were little, we would always at times at dinner do, what was your highlight of the day? What was your low light of the day? So again, tell me about your highlights of the week. Tell me about your low lights of the week. To actually ask them specific questions. Let's go through every class. Tell me about your psych class. Tell me about your political science class. Tell me about it, and asking more engaging kind of questions, because then they may, then it's not just the how are you, how are things going, that kind of stuff. Timing is crucial. When you want to talk versus when they want to talk. A lot of times it's like this, right? So when they're like, do you have a few minutes? I'm like, drop everything. I'm right there. Like, what do you need? And then when I want to talk, I have to be like, I guess this isn't the right time for them. So, but a couple of things that some other friends did that I've used is they create rituals with their students. So again, like you were saying, Steph, people can text all the time, but I've started doing this, and I'm hit or miss, but a friend of mine would always text her college students in the evening when they're probably a little bit more active and awake, and just saying, how was your day? And I'm getting ready for bed, and I just want to know. And she found like that was their time to really kind of process. Now, again, we're tired, we're not really in that space. So it goes back to that timing. But for me, even just texting them, good night, I love you, is like, I'm connecting with you. And now, honestly, I get a GNLYT. Good night, love you too. But you know what? I'll take it. And sometimes a heart. And so I'll take those things because I'm not getting some of the other kind of things that we're used to getting. Or I know one of my students talked about getting connections from home. So some friends that were over last night were saying that their college kids miss their dog. So they were sending pictures of their dog and some videos of their dog. So again, I think thinking about those kind of connections, or sending them articles that might be of interest of them. So if they're interested in some sports, then, hey, did you see this story? And kind of getting them engaged that way, then that may allow them to continue to talk more. So it's hard, but I think there's obviously no one size fits all for every student, but I think continuing to try to be persistent, I think is an important piece for that. And they want that. They just don't know when they want it or how they want it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you said too, there's not a one size fits all approach. I mentioned that too. I feel like when I talk to parents and families, because I feel like people want an answer, like, or instructions almost from us, like, what is what's the formula? Or like, what makes me a supportive figure that's not overly, connecting? Like, what is the exact right balance? And it's hard because it depends, I think. And I try to say too, like, your family best, your student best, and even just having a conversation about how you plan to communicate, sometimes that's helpful too, right?
No, I mean, it's I've had to say, like, again, probably a little bit more with my son, like, I need some information.
Yeah.
I just need some information. So that's your job to communicate with me so I can support you. So let's figure out how we can do this. And because they're just running and, and you're like, okay, I don't know. I see you. But so I think it starts in high school. And we, as they grow developmentally and push away and their friends are more important, that same happens while they're in college, especially that first year, and they're just trying to navigate all that space too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You brought up something that I feel like we actually don't talk about enough with parents and families too, which is it is a two-way street. Right? Like, I feel like a lot when I'm talking to families, they're like, well, how can what should I do in order to best support my student? Of course, that's a great place to start. That's the heart of it. But right too, like, you might have your own needs and expectations. And, for you as a parent, not hearing from your student for 2 weeks might not be acceptable to you. So I think that was such a good point. I haven't thought about that enough, like how that really is a two-way street. I feel like I have to share another story now that I heard from SOAR. But a parent had shared this a few years ago, and she said she had a older student. So she'd been through orientation before, and they were at, a similar SOAR orientation like program. And the university was like, don't call your student right away, like really allow them to reach out first. It's most appropriate to let them get situated, find time with their friends, and then give them a call. So long story short, she said like a few weeks went by and she was mad. Like, she hadn't heard anything from her student. And eventually her daughter called and she was like mortified. And she's like, Mom, all of my friends have heard from their family but me. And so just like, what an example of that, right? Is they actually wanted the same thing, but just didn't have the conversation. So
no, it's really true. And in fact, I really promised myself, especially at that first week, I was like, I'm not reaching out. I'm not reaching out. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Give her space. Give her space. And oh my God, the first time she called, I was just like, like, I was like, okay, whatever you need, whatever you want. I'm right here. I'm right here. And then my husband, like, we were FaceTiming, and all of a sudden we were sitting across the table, and all of a sudden he like comes around and he's like joins the FaceTime, and she's like, hi, Dad. It was just like, I'm just here. I'm just listening. And I was like, oh. So it was just so funny because he was like, oh, she's there. There she is. There she is. It's just like, God. But yeah, it is hard to balance that. Like, is it my need? Is it their needs?
Yeah.
How do you do that? And then you're right. She'll be like, I texted you 3 hours ago. You haven't responded. I'm like, I have a life. I have a job. I have these other things. You are the most important thing in my world, but maybe not always at the moment that you need it, right? And so, it's just it's just weird. And you're right, the whole instantaneous expectation of I texted you and why aren't you there for me right now?
Yeah. That makes me think too. I mean, you brought up a couple of times boundaries as just like as a word in your conversation. And we had a session yesterday too about well-being and connection. And one of the things Warren Shear, one of our colleagues, had talked about was, I think, related to boundaries and communication, and talked about asking, like, may I ask you about this? Or is this a good time? Or you made me think of this too, because you said your husband was like, I'm here, I'm listening. Like sometimes we just want to be heard and we don't want the solution. And I can't imagine how tough that is for you, because you probably know a lot of the answers in terms of like the resources that are there. And so I'm just curious, like, do you have any advice on that for when our students just want to be heard? Maybe they're venting, right, about the furniture and housing, or maybe they just want to vent. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think I love the suggestion that you had is to ask questions, right? Like, what are your expectations? What do you need? And I can remember it was probably maybe week 3 or so. Sarah had a bad day and she just called and lost it and was, I mean, it was just bad. And, and again, to talk, to listen, to support, and really, it really was. I just need to kind of vomit all this out, and and it's exactly what I tell parents. She felt so much better after we hung up, and I was a wreck. Yeah. And I really was like, I wonder if I seriously was like, I wonder if I should just go see her, and I have that luxury, but I was like, oh my God, I'm so this exact scenario. No. She'll, say, call me back if you need anything and all those things. So it is like, I think you just need to say, how are you doing? And then to just say later, I know that was a really hard call. Are you feeling better today? Are you feeling better now? And just to kind of to gauge that. And what can I do to support you? What do you need from me? And they don't really know, right? We always don't know. Yeah. But it's just, I always get confronted on, because I always tend to kind of pray, devil's advocate, or here's the other side. And it's like, I need you to take my side. Oh, thank you for clarifying. You're right. That was bad. They were wrong. You were wrong, So I was like, okay, thank you for telling me that. I will pull back on my expertise of the other side of the story and just support you and how right you are. So yeah, I think that's important, but hard for us to do. Hard for them to express too. But I think, again, trying to say, just continue. I love that boundaries conversation, Stephanie. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I feel like it's hard to, when there isn't necessarily something to fix. And I feel like the pandemic is an example, right? Like we can't change the greater circumstances that have brought us to this place. And so often we just want to vent, and we want someone to say, that's really hard. Like that would be really difficult. And I also think too, one of those topics is finding community, because it is not the same as having our usual interpersonal in-person hugs and interactions and meetups. And, of course, I don't have to tell you how, that this semester looks different. And as you might expect, we received a lot of questions about finding community when we asked about this. And I want to read from a quote from one parent who wrote in. They said, how does she encourage her student when they tell her they're lonely? What exactly is the plan to start getting the students engaged, especially our freshman students, both academically and socially? I actually have a few quotes here. I'll read a couple more. So thank you for those of you who submitted these. Really appreciate you taking the time. Another person said, we want them to struggle. We want small failures to teach resilience, but we don't want to deflate and squash that which has made them great. So I feel like I'm giving you one of the most challenging questions. I know this is a tough one. How do students find community when we are navigating a pandemic?
Yeah, it is so hard, right? It is just for all of us. And I think figuring out what our experience is and then trying to figure out what it is like for them. So it's helping them think about how to engage in different ways. And unfortunately, a lot of it is through screens right now. Yeah. I don't have a good sense of when students are in class of whether they're whether they have to show their screens or not. Have you heard from students about that?
I've heard it can be both.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Yeah. So, but honestly, I would say turn on your video. Really, I mean, because now certainly sometimes you just don't feel it or any of those kinds of things. But I think that just showing that physical presence is a connection. I feel better. When I have meetings with students and I can see their faces and their nonverbals, it's so much better than just dark screens with names or, codes or whatever they are. So that is a form of connection. So to engage in class, to turn on your video, even in the student org stuff, again, same kind of thing. If I've heard it once, I've heard it from a billion times from my daughter. It's socially awkward. And it is, right? I mean, you and I are in meetings together, like you jump in, you're like 3 people talk at the same time and nobody heard anything, and then they all stop and then they all jump, it's just, it is really awkward. And again, especially when you're 18 to 21 or so, and trying to not just be cool, but just be who you are, it's really hard and awkward. So again, normalizing that everybody feels that way. We're all feeling, it's just weird, but we just have to figure out how to do some of that a little better. But I think when you see people and make connections in your classes, then you can take that opportunity. And again, my daughter has said, hey, has done some study partner with folks. So she does feel like she has a connection with somebody in a class, or because she, can see them and talk to them and find that, that they have some similar interests. And so they've reached out and say, hey, do you want to study together? And so again, these pairs and we have spaces on campus that allows them to do that. Now, again, weird dance, weird, awkward kind of thing to do that virtually and then meet up in person as opposed to seeing each other in class and, filling those questions. It is so awkward. And I think validating that is really, really important. But we're trying to get our student organizations to do some of those things too. But we're really giving mixed messages as an institution, right? So we started off, one way and engaged safely, and then we went hardcore shutdown. And now we're like, oh, we're at 1%, less than 1% positive cases. Like, it's okay to ease up again and to do that. I think all of us are scared, right? And the numbers are high in the state. And so there's still that anxiety. And so that just makes it really, really difficult too. But I've heard some of the faith groups are doing some pretty cool things. So like Hillel is connecting with students and bringing students together to do some programming and support. I know the Catholic Newman Center is doing some things. So that might be a space for some students. I see students playing outside. They're exercising. They're doing lots of spike ball. That's the new big craze. My son thought I could try it. I watched it. I'm like, oh my God, I will never play spike ball. No, I'll watch you and your friends, but I am not playing this game with you. But, so we're seeing some of that. Yeah. And as much as they can be outside is a better thing to do. And to try to find some of those connections. I also really want to give a shout out for students who may come from underrepresented identities on campus. I think that's an important thing, that loneliness could be more intense because, again, those numbers are not where we want them to be, and they're not as many. They're getting better, and that's great, but they're still not where that we want them to be. And so again, for some students who may not feel like they have opportunities to see other students from their backgrounds or identity or culture, that's really important. So it's even more important to try to connect with those student organizations, to connect with staff at the Multicultural Student Center or the Gender and Sexuality Center, or again, some faith groups, so that they can be like, oh, yes, there are people here that are like me and that think about those things. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about what you just made me think of this when you said normalizing, and two, I feel like sometimes we forget, no matter what, even if we didn't have the pandemic to deal with, this can be a time of transition. And so I think as much as we can encourage families to have grace with themselves and students to have grace with themselves too, like this is a time, even without a pandemic, that students feel homesick. They do feel lonely. They do wonder where their community is. They do feel awkward asking that person if they want to meet up to study. And so, in some ways, some of the same recommendations or tips that we have would apply, like to know that it's normal, to normalize that, to have grace with yourself, to try to be open to trying something that doesn't work at all and isn't a fit, and walking away and having the courage, I think, sometimes to try something else too. Yeah.
No, those are great. That's a great point. All of these would be normal things. They're intensified by the pandemic. There's no question. But again, and there's a great video I'm trying to think. It was a YouTube video that was done about 5 years ago from a freshman, I think at Cornell. So I think if you Google like freshman at Cornell, and this will come up. And she did this great YouTube video about, I thought college was cool. I thought I'd meet all these friends. I thought I would, have this great social life. And again, pre-pandemic. And she's like, I don't. It's me. I know I'm not, I hang out with people, but they're not like my closest friends. And so what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working? And so it's a great video, again, to normalize that this is a big transition. And again, I always say for any family or parents that have moved or started new jobs, it is awkward. You're like, I don't know these people. Do they want to have lunch with me? Do I not? Do they not? Do I do it? You do it. And you're like, okay, that wasn't really very good. You just have to keep going, right? You just have to keep going. And like you said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's an hour of your life. Okay. So you have coffee with somebody and you're like, ugh, no, thank you. It didn't work again, and now it's weird if they ask you again and you're like, no, thank you. But, those are all life lessons of how to do those things. So no, thank you for that. And I love this video from the student at Cornell because it's just so real. But then like you said, it's just intensified because of the pandemic and how to navigate that in a different situation. So all of those are normal transitions.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that Cornell video. I'd forgotten about it. And when it came out, someone posted it actually in our parent Facebook group. And there were, what was interesting about that is there were probably over 100 comments from people saying, my student totally relates. This is really hard. It's not everyone meets their instant best friend as their roommate, even if they get along otherwise. And so I guess that was just nice to see too, for I think other parents and families to like, oh, this is maybe the majority of students and part of that transition. So I'll have to go back and watch that. Thank you for mentioning. I had forgotten about that piece.
I always watch it before every fall. I really do, because again, it's like, okay, here's the mindset. We just like glamorize college and these deep intellectual connections, and like you said, you meet the love of your life and your best friend in that first week, and woohoo, life is good. Very few of us, right? So those are good points.
Yeah, I relate. I get that. And too, I know we mentioned the panel with Warren yesterday and others. And so I just wanted to let people know that the videos that we're doing or the live events we're doing throughout Family Weekend, they'll live on. So you can go back and you can watch them if you missed it. The panel before this one was yesterday. It was on strategies for well-being and connection. And you can find the recording on our Family Weekend page, or you could watch it on Facebook if you use Facebook. And then we also have an upcoming panel at 2 p.m. Central Time today with the Director of Mental Health Services at University Health Services here at UW about ways to find support, and I think 2 ways that we can help students as they navigate this time. So we'll go deep into that topic too later. So just wanted to mention that for other folks, if you can join us throughout the day. We have a lot of panels today, which is awesome. Lots of good content. So I mentioned we were getting parent questions, and there was a lot about communication and connection, but there was also questions about academics. And I feel like a few parents mentioned that they had students who recently had all of their courses switched to online, and we're just kind of navigating the feelings around that, and also like how do they mentally pivot for that? Do you have any advice that you would give those students?
Yeah, so about 70% of our courses now are online. So we still have, feel like we have some of this hybrid method. But when our cases spiked, my daughter had one class in person, which she loved. But her professor was older, and when the spikes hit, she just did not feel comfortable doing that. And so, and not older like me, like older than me, but because older to them. Like, I was like, well, how old do you think? Oh, they're old. They're like 40. Like, that's old. Anyway, so yeah, I think that just that pivoting and that unknowing is hard, and then knowing that we're going to go back to all virtual after Thanksgiving is another component of that. And so being prepared for that. But that's where I think it's really important for students to try to engage with their faculty members and with their instructors. And I think, and I've heard this from students, that I think our instructors are super sensitive to the lack of community. to their own loss. I read a great article just this last week that was a faculty member talking about the greatest reasons of being in higher education. The most important reason why we do this is because of our students. And to not have those informal conversations or after class or before class and all those things, all that spontaneous, for me to walk to the union and just see students and say, hey, how's it going? And to talk to them. We don't have any of that. And so that's a huge loss for us and a huge loss for them. So again, even though it may feel socially awkward or like, I don't know how to do this, faculty are just missing this just as much as students. And it was a great reminder for me with my daughter that they don't really know what office hours mean. So even though our faculty are providing office hours, because in high school, I can't remember what they call it. I mean, it wasn't, in my day, it was like study hall. Now they call it something else. But anyway, but it was more like you would go to a classroom and you would do your work, but then there'd be teachers there if you had questions, is how it was in high school. So that's how she kind of thought it was in college. So she would go and then she was like, oh my God, it's just me and them. Hi. Now I don't know what to do. No. And it was just, again, there's just so many good things that we just take for granted. And I thought, how would you know what office hours are and what they mean? Now, some faculty do group because then they want that student exchange and to connect with students, to connect and learn from each other. That's super, super powerful. So every instructor is going to do it a little differently. But I think if there's any way that they can connect with their instructors, and I've really been impressed with my daughter's experience. I mean, she has loved all of her classes, even though they're virtual, and she has loved all of her faculty. And again, and I would be totally upfront if there was like, well, there might be one or two that, aren't kind of rocking her boat, but she's just really, really lucky. And I'm just so impressed and so grateful to the instructors that are working super hard. Now, I still hear from students that it's hard, doing the virtual stuff's hard. The other piece that I heard, and I thought this was great advice and feedback from a student, was finding the rhythm. That when you go to class or under regular circumstances, it takes a while, but you find your rhythm. I'm going to go to this class, then I have 2 hours, then I'm going to go to the union, then I'm going to go have lunch, then I'm going to go to the library, and then I'm going to go to this class. Okay, now you're at home. And so there's no rhythm. They don't know how to create that rhythm. And so then they're like, oh, I think I'll do the dishes, or, oh, I think I'll play a video game, or, so so they're struggling with time management and they're struggling with that rhythm. And I thought that was so insightful. And so again, that could be advice for parents to give to students, maybe you should go study. I know my daughter has been going to the union to study more. It gets her out of her room. It gets her in a different space. And so you can figure out those, or you go to the gym. You go to this beautiful new, recreation center, the NIC that we have. And so can you figure out a different rhythm from the walking to class piece that still provides you some of that regularity, that continuity, that normalcy that kind of helps us? I thought that was really, really helpful feedback. So that might be a way for students to try to kind of manage some of these online kind of things as well.
Yeah. Wow. That is such good advice. I feel like I'm thinking about that too, even for those of us who have transitioned to a remote work environment. I feel like that's a struggle. And I wonder too, if that's a way, if you are a parent or family member who has had that experience, to be able to relate a little bit. And that idea, I feel like Dr. Nolan mentioned this too at one point about how when we are in crisis, which we are all in crisis right now, anything we can do to have a sense of control is so helpful for our mental health. And that's such a good point. Figuring out your schedule and having at least that's predictable to you, to have that rhythm and to find that rhythm, but it takes work, right? It's not as natural as when, you were going to class and then that was by the union. So you were going to stop in. And so that is such an insightful point. I'm taking notes. Thank you for that.
Oh, well, no, same thing. And then I was talking to a student yesterday and she was like, the perk of this is I have to get up 10 minutes before class, wash my face and show up. And I was like, see, there you go. So nobody cares if you smell. Nobody cares if you've showered because nobody can smell you right now. And so again, she was just trying to find some of the joys. And, and I appreciate not having to commute sometimes to work, that that gives me a little bit more flexibility in the morning to do some more reading or some other kinds of things. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're right, finding that rhythm. So again, if we were to take a walk at work or at home, while we're working during the lunch hour, which I probably wouldn't be able to do at work, then how do you figure those things out? So yeah, I think you're right. The transferring our own experiences to them could be helpful too.
Lori, our colleague Mick, as you know, talks a lot about the importance of gratitude in developing well-being. And you just made me think of that too. One thing I do try to focus on every day is the time I now have in the morning that I would have spent in the car. And sometimes I try to do like one hard thing. I think it might have been Mark Twain who said like, eat the frog. Like, what's one hard thing you don't want to get done on my work to-do list? Like, I'll try to do like the hardest thing and then be outside and be with my dog and my family, and pausing to be a little bit grateful for that can also, I think, improve our mental health. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, can I add a little bit to that too? Because I know that just, again, dealing with all these traumas, as you talked about, whether it's COVID or the economic recession or racial injustice. I mean, again, all of this is so hard for everybody. And I think that our patience is less. I feel like triggers are higher. I feel like we're not being very nice to each other. I mean, we really aren't as a country. And there are times where I'm like, I watched, not to get political, so I'll localize it, but I was watching a city county kind of political meeting, and it was just so nasty, and yet I couldn't stop. And yet I felt awful afterwards. And I was so frustrated, and like, this is not helping your mental health. You are not feeling good about this experience. Why are you continuing to engage? But I got totally sucked in. I got totally frustrated. And I was just like, and so I just thought, why am I doing this? And so again, trying to keep those boundaries. But as you know, we keep talking in our staff meetings about grace, resilience, and gratitude, right? And so how do we keep doing those things? But I was in a program last week, a counseling center director from another institution. We were talking about mental health at the Board of Regents, because they're the Board of Regents is very, as we all are, concerned about the mental health of our students and what we're doing. So her phrase that really stuck with me was, what are the silver linings? What are the silver linings right now? And honestly, there's days that I'm like, there are zero. I can't find one. And so, but it's really just that phrase has really kind of inspired me to, again, to think about this gratitude and resilience. So she had three that I want to share. I'm really quick with everybody. One was, and she's thinking more about the COVID piece. The one was self-reflection, that this is an opportunity for us to spend more time in developing better relationships with ourselves. And this is the most important part, to build self-compassion and compassion in others. And I thought, oh my gosh, right? So especially that compassion piece, because there's a lot of us that live pretty privileged, pretty glamorous lives, and to really understand the compassion that this is having on all of us, and then the impact on everything else. And then there's the resiliency, right? The development of skills and strength and how we get through this pandemic and its challenges. And again, that's a super, super important muscle. But she had a bunch of them, but these are the three that stuck out to me. This last one is so, so important as well. And that's collective hope. And the way she described it was, a whole world is seeking hope for better days. And this is the most important thing. Hope is the greatest protective factor for personal wellness.
Wow.
Hope is the greatest protective factor for personal wellness. And that's really, really significant. And I know that in my own life and personal experiences, that when I've unfortunately gotten to those just hard times, that it's like, because they'll say that anger or hate is not really the enemy. It's really oh my gosh, I just blanked on the word, but it's where you don't care, where it doesn't matter. And so because we all need hope. And there's a professor from one of my previous institutions, Rick Snyder, who is just a leading scholar and unfortunately passed away, who's done tons and tons of psychological research about hope. And so again, I think if there's ways that we can do that for our students, and to how to help them think about hope and hope for whatever that means and whatever that looks like, I think that's super, super significant. So again, self-reflection, resiliency and collective hope. I think that just really spoke to me. And finding silver linings. And I think that could be a great question to your student, right? Like, what's the silver lining? What is something good that's happened as a result of those things? Because I think what's hard for them a lot of times is that everybody's saying, well, this isn't how we usually do it. This is how we don't do it. We're playing football, but it's not how we usually do it. This is not, we're so sorry. This isn't, and at some point I was like, should we just stop saying that?
Yeah.
This is our experience and we all know it. We don't like it, but let's just stop. This is our normal. Yeah. This is our normal. And so, because I think we're adding to that grief and loss constantly. I feel it. You feel it. We all feel it. And so how can we just say, you know what? Yep, this is what it is. Let's just try, to make the most of it and not kind of reinforce some of that grief and loss. So I think that's important too.
Wow. I love to, if you're ever a person who puts anything on a Post-it note, like on your mirror, collective hope, I feel like is what we have to write. And the idea that collective is part of that. There's a lot there that is really good. I wish we had another hour because I feel like I have so many questions I want to ask you now. We'll have to come back to that one at some point because that's
absolutely
powerful. So I do know as we kind of round out, we got about 15 minutes left. I've probably focused most of my questions on your role as a vice chancellor. And I know you've infused stories from your family and your personal experience, but I'm curious a little bit too, just about your role as a mom. What has been most helpful to you during this time?
Yeah, I think it certainly emphasizes that COVID is hard for all of us and that trying to figure all that out. And so dealing with all my own stuff in that space and then having capacity and energy to support other people has really, really been challenging. But in terms of just my college student, I was surprised how quickly my identity as a mom has been challenged already. And so, so this just, this is where I may just tear up but one, in two parts. One is just how much I miss my daughter. And again, I get it. Family, parents in California, New York, all those other places that are far, you're like, seriously, she's 30 minutes away. But you know what? Just like you, she's not there every day. She is not there every day. And I miss that desperately. And so, so there are times that I'm just like last night, like we would a lot of times just watch TV together on a Friday night, find a movie, find a show and stuff. And I was like, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm ready. Like, oh, where is she? Like, so, I mean, I just still feel that loss. I just feel that loss. And so now again, I'm very fortunate. I can get a little bit of, a few snippets, but then my own identity, right? Like, I was her mom and I would do all these things and help all this, and that's starting to change. And I can already feel that starting to change, even with my son, who's a junior in high school, like they need me less. And I'm like, what's my job? And so like with my son, my battle with my son is laundry. So I make him do his own laundry because he needs to do his own laundry. And that's a really good thing to do. He will go 3 weeks. This is embarrassing. He will go 3 weeks and not do his laundry. And I'm like, you know what? This will just make me feel better. And this will be my gift to him. And this will make him feel better. I'm just going to do his laundry. Because that'll make me feel better. I'm still a mom. I'm still taking care of him. And then I have this like, no, don't do his laundry. No, he needs to like, oh my gosh, right? So it's just these little like constant kind of things. And again, I always say to people, like, is this about me or is this about you?
Yeah.
And so that's I'm always checking myself. So my daughter went through sorority recruitment, and which is great. Again, virtual, not as fun, not as cool, didn't meet as many people, make some of the same connections, which is a great part of it. But she got cut from a chapter that has family connections. And I was ticked. And again, same thing, like, who should I call? I wonder what I should do. I wonder what I should do something. And then I was like, nope, you can't do anything. And I was like, but I was crushed. I was mortified. I was like, and I was not in a sorority. Again, I was first gen, so I didn't know about it, but there's just, again, some other family connections. I'm like, oh, this would be so lovely. This would be so cool. And she was like, yeah, that kind of sucks. And I'm like, that's it. That's all. That's it. Okay. You're good. I'm not. All right. So I was like, okay. Again, about you or about me. This is total about me.
Yeah.
So I had to call my friends and be like, this just happened. And it was like, okay, but what other groups are still interested? And I'm like, well, yes, there are. But, and they're like, this is her process. So again, my friends are like doing all the same stuff with me that I would do for, for other parents. But it really was like, and I, again, this indignation, like, are you kidding me? Do you not know who my kid is? Like, she's awesome. Why wouldn't you want her? Why wouldn't you? I mean, it's just like, oh my God, so it's just amazing. And that's the other conversation I've had with her, to say, you know what, you are a rock star. Mm-hmm. But you do know you are surrounded with 45,000 other rock stars. Yes. And actually rock stars who are better than you.
Yeah.
I just want you to remember that. I just want you to remember that, because I think you're fabulous, and I know how great you are, and I know how hard you work. The challenge, the bar has now been lifted. So just be ready. Just be ready, because you've not had that to the same degree that you've had in other experiences. And so again, trying to figure out all of those kinds of things out is just super, super hard. So, and then again, it's just the worry. And I loved what you said, Stephanie. It's about loss of control. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to give her space. So she'll call and she'll be like, I think I'm going to go do this activity. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding? Like, this is COVID. No. And I'm like, deep breaths, like, do you think that's a good idea? Are they all wearing masks? Yeah. Have you asked about these things and about safety? Are you planning to come see us? Do you think you're going to come? I mean, it's like, and to really just like, literally like bite my tongue and be like, okay, I hope you make the best decision that you can. Like I try to do this like soft voice, but in my head, I'm like, are you nuts? Like, do not do that. And so even this weekend, she was like, I think my friends and I might road trip. And I'm like, what? No. But then I had another parent whose kid was like, who did road trip, didn't tell her mom. Oh. And she was like, you did what? And I was like, remember, they're like stretching the boundaries. They're 18, they're adults. They don't need our permission to do these things. And so it's just this whole reminder of, I have no control. Yeah. I have no control. And, and again, I just, I trust her. I know she's going to do the right thing. And again, I'll be like, there could be a consequence for that decision. This is what might happen if you decide to do that. I just want you to be prepared. And she's like, well, that'll never happen. I hope it won't, but I'm just telling you, so, and again, that it goes back to one of those earlier questions, right? Like, do I want her to get in trouble? Do I want her to, no, but you know what? This is part of her thing. And I just empathize with that. Yeah, that tension, that protection, that like, do as I say, I'm still your parent, all those things. And just this, really just trying to give advice and hope and trust, and then being there to catch them, and not in a shaming, judging, I told you so, but you know what, I understand you made that choice, and now what do we do? And how do you have to balance those, those consequences? So, I truly empathize with all those changes of being a parent and the loss, and just missing them a lot, and missing part of the family, and that's the other interesting thing too, that, everybody, when I talk to my family, they're all like, how is she? How's that going? And I was like, well, what about me? Ask me. Ask me how I'm doing. I'm not doing well. So it's and I will also say, and so here's how I think I'm being helpful to parents. I always feel like I've had this lens, as through my work,
Mhm.
but I read every email from, if I were not in my job, would I know would this email make sense to me? Would this decision make sense to me? Would I know what to do? Or if my daughter's getting this email, will she know what that means, and will she know what to do? And so again, just kind of like the office hours thing, we just get, this is so normal because this is our work and what we do, but we have so many people that this is the first time, or our students, this is the first time. And so what does that mean? And I don't know. I don't even know what you're talking about. That doesn't even make any sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, I got to take 3 steps back and
Mhm.
kind of share that information. So it's been super, super helpful to give her feedback, to hear her feedback about her experiences or from her friends, and some of those kinds of things too. I think it does help me do my job better as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a journey. It is a
Mhm.
journey for sure. For sure. It's
Absolutely.
awesome.
It reminds me of Glennon Doyle. I'm going to misquote this, but she has something in one of her books about being at a parenting conference. And I told this during my SOAR presentation too, but a parent was essentially like, my child has gone through a lot of hard times and I feel like I failed them. And Glennon's question back to her is like, who do you want to raise as a person? And she's like, well, I want someone who's like kind and wise and compassionate. And her response is like, there's only one thing that teaches them that. It's going through hard things. It's living
Mhm,
through pain.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I've just always carried that with me, even applying it to myself sometimes too. Like that is really what molds us. And yes, my daughter's coming up on her first birthday, and I feel like I should be congratulated. So I know what you mean about feeling like people checking in on you too. So.
Oh yeah, and let's just be clear, Steph. Her first birthday party, however you have to do it in this year, will be for you, not for her, right? So like let's just call that too. So
I have to
you'll
go
have
back
to
to
do
your
it.
question. Is this for me or for her?
Exactly. As long as you have her favorite flavor in the cake or whatever treat she gets. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it is all about you. All about you. And that's fine. And that is absolutely fine. So it's all good. It's all good.
Oh, this has been the best. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I guess I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else that you want our families to know?
Yeah, thanks. It has been fun. I love chatting with you, and I know you're a new mom, and just going through all this, and so you'll just be the best ever with all this great wisdom. And yet, you know what, we're not perfect. And so I admire it. I remember I took parenting classes when my kids were little, and to again how to help teach them to be this, kind adult. And and now I've raised really strong children, and it's like, okay, you can be strong with everybody, but not with me. And so I just have to remember, like, these are all good things. But I just want to end maybe the conversation as we started, and that's with gratitude. And I just want to say thank you so much to the families and parents for choosing UW-Madison, and for your students choosing UW-Madison. And I can really say this. I mean, I believed it before, but I'm living this. Our children, our students have picked great and excellent, excellent institutions, one of the best research universities in the country and the world. But what I'm seeing firsthand, and again, which I knew, but just confirming, we have faculty and staff who care about our students, who are so committed to their learning and growth and development. And bias, we have amazing student services that are going to help them succeed and to help them change the world. And they do want to change the world. And so this world is so hard right now, but we will get through this. We will get through this, and we will be stronger, and we will be smarter, and we're gonna be more innovative as a result of all this. And that's the thing the chancellor keeps saying to us, is what lessons are we learning from this experience that we can take and continue to create in our work going forward. So I just want to say thank you for the partnership. Thank you for everything that you do as a parent to just support your student. Quick plug, if your child has not gotten their flu shot, get the flu shot. We had him at the NIC and other places. I think now they have to go to UHS, but they can still get their free flu shot. That's hard to say, at UHS. And so that's super, super important, more important than ever during this time that they do that. And so just hang in there, continue to support and challenge your student, continue to provide us feedback. That we're here for you as well as we are for your students. And of course, if there's anything that we need or can or should do for your student, to always let to let us know. And I just always say it's a great day to be a Badger. It's a great day to be a Badger and on Wisconsin. So we're so grateful. We're so grateful.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful to you for your time. And I think too, the messages of support that you've sent to our families have really resonated. I remember one parent wrote and said, "Thanks for keeping it real, Dr. Reesor." And that's where I'm going to leave it today. So thank you for your time, and families, thanks for joining us. If you have additional questions or curiosities that have come up, you can let us know. Send us an email at parent@uwmad.wis.edu. We are always a resource here for you. Appreciate you, and we are in this together. Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Dr. Lori Reesor, thank you for your time, and on Wisconsin.
Thank you, on Wisconsin.